I just got done watching Del Toro's brand new animated film, his big passion project that he's been trying to get made forever. It's finally hitting Netflix this year, and it's Pinocchio. Yes, this is the second Pinocchio we're getting just in this year. The first one was the terrible live-action reimagining of the original Disney classic. Now, this is not a new reimagining because this is not from Disney. It's, yes, of course, borrowing certain elements from that special fairy tale that many people know, but this is Del Toro's version. It's dark, but at the same time, it's whimsical, and I'm ready to say it's the best version of Pinocchio in filmmaking that we have ever gotten, because this is truly a magical movie that I think a lot of you guys are going to truly enjoy, and I was very fortunate enough to be able to see this in theaters. If it is playing in a theater near you, absolutely go check it out. If it's not, when it does hit Netflix, you are in for a special ride. Del Toro's version of Pinocchio is a darker version of the classic children's fairy tale of a wooden puppet that transforms into a real living boy. Now, it's not just directed by Del Toro, it's also directed by Mark Gustafson, and it stars the likes of Gregory Mann, Ewan McGregor, Finn Wolfhard, Ron Perlman, Cate Blanchett, David Bradley, Tim Blake Nelson, Christoph Waltz, and even Tilda Swinton. Now, like I mentioned, I had actually been looking forward to this for a while. This is actually one of those projects that I never thought was actually going to be able to get made. Del Toro talks a lot of different projects that he wants to make. He's one of the most creative visionaries in Hollywood. And then sometimes he just gets screwed over and not able to actually make the projects that he wants to make. I'm looking at you, Hellboy 3, and I'm looking at you, his version of Pacific Rim 2. And very much you can go down the list of certain projects that he's never even been able to get made. And that, God bless my soul, I wish we could have gotten this. The Haunted Mansion project with Ryan Gosling he was to make. But I'm so happy that Netflix went in and was allowing him to make his version of Pinocchio, because Pinocchio is one of my favorite fairy tales as a kid. I love that story. I love the whole concept of it all. And I love the original Disney version, but when you go back to watch it nowadays, take off those rose-colored lenses, it's still fun, it's still whimsical, it's still magical, but it's not as perfect as you remember. And maybe that might be some blasphemy for a lot of you guys, but I'm ready to say, and like I mentioned in my intro, this is the best version of Pinocchio that we've gotten in film. And a lot of that is because of the themes and messages that it's absolutely able to explore. And while it does definitely keep the message of what Pinocchio symbolizes as being a real boy and what you're supposed to do, because that fairy tale, when you look at it on a surface level, it's supposed to be, you treat your adults with respect, you obey the rules, all sorts of things like that. You do what the perfect ideal boy is supposed to do. And while there are deeper things in there, that is the simplistic version of it all. But this version tackles more. In a way, Del Toro actually tackles the meaning of life in here. And that was like one of the most beautiful and poetic things that I could possibly see in this. It's a gorgeous movie that when it tackles these themes, while it has all the other themes that you've ever seen in Pinocchio before, at the same point in frame, this is a story about life and death. What happens when you lose people in your life? How do you move on? How do you not move on? What happens when maybe that last conversation you had someone, the next day they die? Like, you never know. And these elements are portrayed throughout this entire movie in such a simplistic manner, but one that is there to discuss overall an idea of life and death. And again, in my way of thinking, the meaning of life. And it really hits you in the heart, and it starts to make you kind of reflect on your world, your life, your viewpoints, and everything kind of going on. And again, what Del Toro was able to infuse in such a classic children's fairy tale, he was able to infuse a new, darker theme that I feel like has always been there. But this version really definitively shows it and tells it in a grand way, and a magical way as well, because this is magic. Like Del Toro, every time I go and experience one of his movies, whether it's one of the movies that I absolutely love of his, or maybe even a movie that I don't particularly love, but I just like, I always find magic and whimsy in all of his. And in this particular story, this is a darker fairy tale. It's one that I think you can still show kids, and they'll enjoy it for what it is, but at the same point in frame, this is an adult movie. This is a movie that, again, touches on death and life and how you move forward with that. And it's beautiful in all ways, specifically even in the animation, which I'm a big fan of clay animation. Everything that even like Leica Studios does, because this is like the type of films they make. But this is something that you don't see come around too often. And watching this movie was kind of the same feelings that I got watching Kubo and the Two Strings for the first time. And the feeling that I got watching Kubo and the Two Strings was this magical feeling that I had when I had first seen Nightmare Before Christmas or James and the Giant Peach and experienced my first version of those clay animations. And I was just completely blown away. And Pinocchio brought back all those nostalgic feelings for me because the animation is stunning and gorgeous, and all of the attention to detail that they do on each and every one of the characters is so finite and tuned to such a high level. And they do something special here where, like, you could argue that each character in here in a way looks like a puppet. And the way that Del Toro is telling the story is like puppeteering. But the way that, Pinocchio actually looks like how a puppet would look to these people. And I love that, and I love the story that he actually kind of decides to tell in here, and really much the added bonuses that he adds to the story, because you see the familiar beats in here, and that's the truth, but there is one central part of this all, again, that touches into that life and death, where Pinocchio, like, what happens if, like, can Pinocchio die? They touch on that. Like, what happens if he might die? Where does he go? What does he do? Does he come back? Does he not? The afterlife is a big theme in this entire film, and there's certain things that may layer throughout there. And I just loved it. I love the mythology and everything that Del Toro was able to bring into here, because it also added the thing that I love about Del Toro movies, which is the horror of it all. He frames horror imagery in here in a very grandiose way. And this is a movie that the more and more I kind of sat on it, kind of leaving the theater, the more and more I started to kind of love it even more. And this isn't just a movie that I appreciate, it's a movie that I soulfully look at, and I'm like, this is one of the best films of 2022. And, I mean, God forbid it's great. And all of the voice acting is great in here as well. Ewan McGregor as Jiminy Cricket is fantastic. I love Ewan McGregor's voice. Heavily much, Gregory Mann should absolutely be acclaimed for his voice as Pinocchio, because he really brought this character to life. Ron Perlman is great. Finn Wolfhard's great. David Bradley as Geppetto is so freaking underrated. Tim Blake Nelson's great. But I will also give a shout out to Christoph Waltz, who we know he's a phenomenal actor, but the role he plays in here is just perfect. Last but not least, the score in here is so magical. It reminds me of so many different classic fairy tale movies that you would watch back as a kid, but they just all bring this story to life, and it's a movie that, again, I cannot wait to see again. But when it does come down to issues, I don't think the movie's perfect. I don't think it is at all. I think there is this political undertone within this movie, which I think is very important to Del Toro, and I think it was very interesting to take Pinocchio through. I personally would not have had it in there. I think the movie is a little bit too long. It's almost 2 hours, and I do feel like you probably could have shortened it by at least 5 to 10 minutes. And there is this grandiose section where either you wanted to do that or you didn't, and it's okay if you did. But then right afterwards, it kind of tries to resolve another storyline in here, which again, I don't think was needed. And I understand all these ideas are important to Del Toro, and I think are important in some ways, but the themes and messages of life itself is the kind of the thing that I wish they would have focused on a little bit more towards at least that middling part heading into the third act. But besides that, talk about magic. Del Toro's Pinocchio movie is sincere with its message about life itself and the meaning of time and death. Dark and whimsical, this is the best version of Pinocchio we've seen on screen, and with all that said, I'm going to give this film an A-. Let me know down below what your guys' thoughts are on this film. I'm very curious to hear your guys' thoughts. Make sure to hit that like, subscribe button, comment down below, and of course, until next time, stay class.